Welcome to another episode of the East Tennessee Group podcast. Welcome, everybody. Hello.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yes. And you know what, Chevy, I thought would be like a really fun topic to talk about how we get paid.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm seeing it more and more. Clients don't understand. We've got a lot of first-time home buyers out there. They don't understand. And even people who are like veterans at the investment game, say, or they've purchased before, they really don't understand how we get paid. And that's important for a lot of reasons. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about that. Austin, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, well, I agree, because that definitely is a question. I've talked with multiple different people, and I think there's some other companies out there that work a little bit differently. But, overall, it's pretty simple. We've got some, of course, fees that are set for my brokerage themselves, or our brokerage itself, that we do have to pay as far as transaction fees and things. But overall, it's pretty simple, cut and clear. We negotiate that with the seller and the seller's agent.
Yes.
And my buyer doesn't have to worry about anything other than a simple transaction fee that's just going to make sure everything goes smoothly.
That's part of my buyer consultation, which is usually on the phone nowadays because everything's so fast. Yeah. But that is one of my questions is, do you know how I get paid? Mm-hmm. Because one, if they don't, I've got to educate them. And if they do, I need to make sure that they understand, because I do pass on those transaction fees to the client. But I need them to understand also, because we've all seen those listings on the MLS where they're $1.
Yes.
And I always use that as a joke. I'll say, there are some jerk agents out there that, pay $1. In that case, you and I might have to have another conversation. He. But usually the seller pays. Do y'all see that? Do you?
I do see that a lot, Hilary. And the other thing that I'm also experiencing a lot of with the investors, I work a lot with people from different states, and it works differently in different states. So I have had investors who have actually, once we've been talking through that, again, it's something that I always, talk to my clients about, but we'll be talking through it and they'll say, oh yes, and on top of the price and the closing fees that I'm paying, to make sure title is clean, then I have to pay you. At which point I'm kind of like, well, no, in this case, you don't have to, because that's already been negotiated. The seller is paying me. And oftentimes it's northeastern states that things are just a little bit different.
Interesting.
So it's really important, because if we're not, if people are thinking they are having to pay more than they are, then obviously that's a problem. But you're right. The flip side of that is that there are some circumstances where the seller specifically has priced a property and they have not included anything to pay the buyer's agent. And that also is something that happens in, other parts of the country. And so it's really important that we do have that discussion with our buyers, because it is happening. And, the bottom line is that we can always still negotiate for the seller to pay us. That's just the bottom line. Even if they're only offering $1, we can still negotiate for the seller to pay it, but the buyer just needs to be made aware that that is what is happening. So whereas I think in the past maybe it was a little more cut and dried, nowadays it can be more on a individual basis as to what's actually happening.
So let's talk about, we go to a listing presentation for a seller and we're going to set a commission rate, whether that's Chevy may charge 7% and you may charge 6%, but it is a percentage, right? Mm-hmm. And that seller is going to pay. So Austin, if you get a listing agreement for 6%, then the seller is going to be responsible ultimately for paying buyer's agent and his or her own listing agent. And then, the percentages, we could be here all day talking about how fair they are, especially here in Knoxville on average. But so the seller is going to pay both sides of that commission typically. And I just don't think buyers know that.
Well, I'm actually going to kind of jump in there, Hilary, because when you actually negotiate as part of the listing agreement, that seller is paying you, the listing agent. it's up to you as the listing agent to pay a cooperating broker.
Yes.
So the bottom line is, whatever you negotiate from the seller, you can keep all that for yourself. Now, the seller has to be aware of that, and they in fact have to sign off on the listing agreement as to how much you are going to be offering a broker that is going to bring a buyer. And that's kind of where it comes in, where we may negotiate a certain percentage, but some agents will offer a different amount of that overall percentage out. And in this area, and I see this more and more in Sevierville, that percentage could be anywhere from, well, not a percentage, $1, which is pretty much zero, all the way through normally around 4%. So, and it can be anywhere within that range, which is really why it's important that that people know, that we educate people about how we are actually getting paid. Because the bottom line is this: sometimes the buyer may end up paying.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I always tell my people, is that chances are you're not going to pay anything because, like you said, Hilary, it's 100% negotiated. In the state of Tennessee, there's no standard commission for anything. But there are some times where a fair commission is not paid. I've had some for sale by owners.
Right.
You've got certain agents that we won't talk about that do $1. Some people do 1%, and it's just, you have to know your worth in this business. And I mean, we're the number one team at United. We all know that we're going to take excellent care of our people.
Right.
And, and you get what you pay for. If you want to have an agent help you that makes 1%, then you're going to get 1% of their time.
Tell me how that conversation goes for you with a client. If it's,
It goes exactly like that. I mean, it's cut and dry. And they understand it because people want other people to succeed, or at least most people do. So you talk to people and you explain to them, hey, I don't want you to have to pay anything. I'm going to try to negotiate everything with the seller, and most of the time that's how it happens. In fact, 99% of the time that's how it happens.
Yes.
But that 1% that it doesn't happen, it's like, look, you want this house really bad. I want to get that house for you, but unfortunately we're going to have to negotiate with you because they're not offering a fair commission, and I have to pay my family. I've got to pay the government for taxes. I've got to pay all of my fees. Nobody understands how expensive it is to be in real estate unless you're in real estate.
Right.
And that just brought up this excellent point. Every house, every address potentially offers a different commission.
Yeah.
So your buyer could be looking at a house with a $1 commission, or they could be over here looking at a house where it's
3%.
Those are great. So everything is different too.
But the bottom line is that regardless of what that commission is, you're still doing the same job.
Yeah.
You're still providing the same care. Your ethics and the standards that we're held to don't change.
Yeah.
And so it really is important to make sure that people know that, they're not going to, they're not going to we're not offering a substandard, discounted kind of service, And what I've often found is when people are actually offering less, they've actually had that conversation with the seller. And so the seller is expecting you as the buyer's agent to negotiate a commission. So, it's not something to be afraid of. It's not something that's, new even. But it's just the bottom line is that they've been told, hey, look, the buyer's agent is probably going to come and negotiate from you. So they're waiting for that. They know that. Like you say, people want other people to succeed. Nobody wants anybody to work for $1 or for nothing,
Exactly, yeah. And if those people do exist out there, then I don't want to work with them anyways, and that's the bottom line.
And I just think that money... Go ahead, Chevy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one more point on that would be FSBOs. FSBOs, you always have to negotiate. Yeah. And FSBOs, you always end up doing double the work.
Yes.
So, for those FSBOs, I will not do one for less than 3%.
Amen.
And if I do take one for say 2%, which would be my bottom, my minimum there, I tell them to talk to a lawyer for everything. Like I'll tell them like, hey, if I'm here to help the buyer and the buyer only. You're going to have to go talk to a lawyer.
Right. Yes. And that's always good practice anyway to do that. We're not lawyers.
Exactly.
And so, especially with a for sale by owner, they have chosen to not be represented.
Yeah.
They've chosen that path, and they've chosen that probably because they don't want to pay a listing agent to do that. And so, yes, you've actually you're taking the right path there to recommend that they talk to an attorney about that.
And I just feel like money, I don't know if that's a generational thing, but it's really, some folks see it as taboo and, you don't want to talk about, but I love getting it out up front on the buyer, on the call, the initial call or visit with the buyer. That way, in the heat of the moment, when we are working to get them the house that they have fallen in love with, and there's 16 other offers and 16 other agents, it's not such a shock to them when they're having to talk about money.
It's a real awkward conversation if you wait until you're writing an offer to tell someone that they're going to have to pay you a commission.
Yeah.
Real awkward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or, even the fees, our brokerage does have the admin fee. And so I like to get that out up front. This is something you're going to need to bring to the closing table. So I talk about all of the money, all of the things that I guess, because I just wouldn't want there to be a surprise.
Well, transparency is always the key in everything. Like when you go buy a new car, anything you do in life, like you just want transparency. You want to know exactly what you're paying for, exactly what each fee is. That way you can plan accordingly. The problem is when you don't have that, because then, you say you buy a new car, well, then you've got this fee, then you've got this warranty, and you got this fee, and your $20,000 car, that's not real anymore, but your $20,000 car then turns into a $25,000 car,
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think real estate's the same way, and,
I just think overall people a lot of times just may not understand because they're not doing what we're doing.
Yes.
So I just think I thought this would be an informational episode of our show.
No, I think it's great. I get that question all the time.
Yeah, you mentioned as well about transaction fees. This is something I started in real estate 13 years ago, probably 14 now, and transaction fees were kind of new at that stage. And I remember that I was working and my transaction fee 13 or 14 years ago was $250. And, it's $250 and basically that's making sure that we're dotting I's, crossing T's. It's because we want to protect people's money, people's investment, And now here at United, it's a little bit more, we're a few years down the line and we're at a $495 transaction fee. But that, and I always explain this to my client when we're talking about it, that gets the attorneys that we use, that we have direct links to. If we have any questions, any things we're not sure of, 1031 attorneys, all sorts of people at our fingertips that we can kind of count on. And, I've had opportunity to work at other companies where transaction fees are so much more.
Much higher,
and, oh my goodness, right? Austin, yes, you had the same thing.
I know, and when I tell people about the transaction fee, it used to be a hard conversation because of the price points that they were at. But, nowadays, especially with what it does cover, because it does give a lot of security, it's not a problem. People completely understand it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like everything is kind of fee-based at this point. There's a convenience fee for paying your own cable bill online or your internet, paying that. There's a fee for a fee for a fee.
Yes.
And so in exchange, I will just add value with a deep Rolodex or connection or something like that. So I just don't really think that people balk at the fee as much as they would the surprise if you're standing in the driveway of a home that they love and you're like, hey, by the way, I need you to pay this transaction fee, so I'll just go ahead and get that in the special steps.
Yes.
Well, and something else to think about, your buyers are the ones, that we're talking about mostly, but, a seller has to pay 6% and a fee.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, especially if you're a buyer, it's really not a bad deal at all.
Right.
Yes. So
Yes.
Well, we're all about transparency.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so anyway, if no one else has anything to add, I guess that's a wrap for today. I just thought that would be a great topic for us to tackle.
Yeah,
Super.
I think
Think
that's
that
awesome.
covers it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. And this is the East Tennessee Group, and remember, we are close to everything, but miles from the ordinary.